This thing is ringing off the hook, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. I've talked to most of you over the last few days about replants. I think we've got replants open everywhere we need them. Phone's ringing off the hook about prevented planting. I looked just a minute ago on the radar, and guess what? It's raining again. Today is Tuesday, June 9th, and we're getting close to the end of the final plant date, and then not too far away from the late planting period, the end of the late planting period, just depending on which county you're in. So let's talk about prevent and what we need to do and what you need to know, and some check marks we need to get in place. So let's jump right in. I'm going to use peanuts as our example for prevented planting. So since the West Alabama, Santa Rosa County, Escambia County, since that area is probably the worst right now, I'm getting the most phone calls from, we'll use a 4,500 pound peanut average. So the farm's APH, its actual production history, is 4,500 pounds. This particular farmer is on 70% level, right? So 70% of 4,500 pounds is 3,150 pounds per acre. If you want to figure yours, you just say your average yield times your crop insurance level. So in this case, we're at 3,150 pounds per acre. The prevented plant and payment for peanuts is 55% of what your coverage per acre would have been. Cotton is 50%, soybeans, which we ain't quite there yet, it'll be 60%, but peanuts is what we're focusing on today. So if I've got a 3,150 pound guarantee per acre, 55% of that is 1,732 and a half pounds. That's the prevented plant and pound guarantee for this particular farm. All right, and so we say we got 1,732 pounds times what? Times the price of peanuts. So they're at $4.91 a ton for crop insurance, whether you're RP or YP, that's the same. $491 a ton, or 0.2455 cents per pound. Now, if you're somebody that has a peanut contract higher than $4.91, then obviously when you get that, that'll change the dynamic just a little. But we're just going to figure it at the standard projected price of peanuts, which is $4.91. So 1,732 pounds, $4.91 a ton. That's $425 worth of value in that prevented plant and claim. So now let's talk about all, or most all, I can't do them all, but let's talk about most of the situations that would come along with that base idea, right? 1,732 pounds, $4.91 a ton, $425 worth of prevent plant and coverage available. Here we go, point number one. Prevented plant and claims that are paid for the first crop, in peanuts for this case, crop insurance is going to hold out 100% of the crop insurance premium. So even though you're getting 55% of the coverage, right, for prevented, it's 100% of the crop insurance claim, 100% of the crop insurance premium. So that first crop, hold out 100%, we would pay you the difference. So if it was $425 worth of coverage and you had a $20 premium, then we're going to knock, you'd have $405 worth of claim, right? So $425 was our example, minus the premium. If you don't plant a second crop, in other words, you file prevented on peanuts, you're prevented by the final plant date, you're prevented in the late plant period, and you say, I'm going to just leave it fallow. If you don't plant another crop on that same dirt, then no APH is counted. So what does no APH is counted mean? It means that in your yield history database for that peanut prevent planting, we don't even count the 2026 year. But if you plant a second crop on that same dirt, then it changes the situation. So if you had we'll use a Escambia, Florida, 6/5 final plant date, 10-day late planting period. Let's say that you come in there on 6/16, that's one day after the late planting period, and you decided I'm going to plant soybeans on it. If you plant that dirt, that prevented plant dirt gets planted to another crop, the situation changes. You would then go in there and say, these peanuts that were prevented from planting will have to account for a yield. And you say, well, nothing was planted. What yield do they get in my database? They would get that 1,732 pound prevented planting guarantee, right? So if you plant to a second crop, know that your APH is going to take a ding. If you don't plant anything behind the peanuts, no APH is counted. So if you plant to a second crop You're going to take a ding on the peanuts if that's what you file prevented planting on. Prevented planting, for the acres to be eligible, and for that farm to be eligible, it had to have had a crop planted and harvested on it one out of the last 4 years. And you say, well, I just took this new farm in and it hadn't been planted. If it has not had planted and harvested production on it one out of the last 4 years, it is not eligible for prevented planting. So any of this new breaking ground that you couldn't get planted is not eligible for prevented planting. There's also a 2020 rule for prevented planting. You say, well, I know there's 2020 rules for replants. Well, there's also one for prevented planting. For a farm to qualify, if you're on optional units where each farm stands independently, you have to be prevented on 20% of that farm or 20 acres, whichever you reach first. So in our mind, there's a 100-acre field out here, and you had 10 acres you couldn't plant. It will not qualify. It did not meet the 2020 rule. So on that 100-acre farm, if you had 20 acres that you couldn't plant, it would be eligible. That 20 acres would be eligible. So the 2020 rule applies for prevented planting. If you're enterprise units, you don't look at them farm by farm by farm, right? You look at it as a whole. So if I had 5 peanut farms and we go down and add those together, you would only have to meet the 20 acres for the unit or that group of farms. So it's a little easier to qualify with the 2020 rule on enterprise unit policies than it would be on farm by farm or optional units covered. So the 2020 rule does apply. Prevented planting, this is something that you've got to pay attention to. Prevented planting claims must be open with me or for crop insurance within 72 hours of the end of the last day of the late planting period. 72 hours from the end of the late planting period. So if it's peanuts and you're in Escambia, Alabama, 6/5 is the final plant date, 10-day late planting period, so that's 6/15, so that's Monday. So you've got to call me and let me know, I've got peanuts, I'm not going to get planted, open up a prevent planting claim. So by the 15th, if you're in Escambia, Florida, Santa Rosa County, Florida, same date, 6/5 is the final plant date, 10-day late planting period is going to roll in here about Monday. So I'm going to try to call everybody and ask you, hey, do you have any prevent planting that we need to get you signed up for? We don't want to miss it. So you need to call me, and rest assured, I'm going to try to call you. But if you have anything that's not going to be planted and not planted at all, too wet, you got to get this open. I can't do it later. It'll be a delayed notice. Probably won't get paid. So, 72 hours. You say, well, am I just eligible everywhere I'm prevented? No, there's caps on that. And so your maximum number of eligible acreage for prevented planting will be the highest acre total you have planted in the last 4 calendar years. So if you planted 500 acres one year, and 1,000 acres one year, and 50 acres one year, and 750 acres one year, your highest maximum allowable will be that 1,000. So the highest acres you planted out of the last 4, that will be your cap. If you've exceeded that, picked up a bunch of new land and you've exceeded that, you're going to get knocked out. So usually we can work around that. It rolls to other crops. There's a lot more to it, but I'm just giving you the mile-high view of prevented. So here's your recap. If you have any acres that you're not going to get planted by the end of the late planting period, you got to let me know and let me open up a prevent plant claim. You'll have to go to FSA and certify those acres as prevented from planting. The county committee will have to approve that acreage so it's on the 578. All those are formalities, but the main thing is I've got to get the claim open. If you're going to leave that peanut ground fallow or cotton ground fallow, then we're going to hold out 100% of the premium on prevented planting. You say, well, what kind of turnaround time will we have? Well, let's look at this logically. You've got until July 15th to get your acres certified at the FSA office. I hope you don't wait that long. But once you get them certified, I've got to key them in. Then the claim, all the claim paperwork's got to be going in. So you're probably not going to know realistically if the prevented plant even is going to qualify and you're going to get a payment till sometime in August. I wish it was sooner, but that's just the way the ball bounces. We're not going to know before then. So get the claim open, get it certified. We'll get the adjuster starting to work on gathering rainfall data. And when we started in April in D3, D4 droughts, now we're 20 inches of rain into planting season. Never had both scenarios in the same crop year, but we do this year, so we're gonna work through that. So get them certified. I'll be calling you. We'll get these claims opened up just as soon as you call me or I call you. If there's one other little side note, if you plant to a second crop, okay, so I had peanut prevented planting, I got past the end of the late plant period, now I'm gonna plant soybeans. If you plant those soybeans one day before the end of the late plant period for peanuts, it negates the peanut claim. All right, so the logic there is, if you could have planted soybeans in the late plant period, they say you should have planted the peanuts. So if you get one day too early on that second crop, it negates that first prevented planting claim. So that's important. So peanut late planting window, one day after that you can plant to another crop. So if you plant to another crop, here's one other side note, and I'll quit killing you with side notes. If you plant to a secondary crop, okay, and let's just say it's soybeans. So if you come in there and plant soybeans on that PP peanut ground, you had 55% prevented planting peanuts. If you plant to a second crop, you are going to get 35% of the 55%. So not 35% of the whole, 35 of the 55, right? So if you plant to a second crop, then you can only get 35% of the prevented planting guarantee. Now, the peanut insurance will also reduce its premium down to 35%, and then those soybeans are fully insurable. So here's your takeaways. Call me, let me get the claim open. Realize that prevented planting is not all said, all done just because we file it. It's got to be general to the area. It's probably going to be in a lot of areas, like a lot of guys call it. The main thing is you and I need to talk the end of this week, very first of next week. Let's get the ball rolling. I'll give you some more examples if you need them. On the end of this presentation, Chris is going to put those plant dates, late planting periods for every county that's watching this, right? So yours will be on there. You can look them up. You see the final plant date and the late planting period. Sorry we've got so much prevented planting going on, but that's just what we've been dealt this year. You call me, I'll call you. We've got to get it handled by the first of the week, and I appreciate you and thank you for your business.